What's up, guys? Hope you're doing well. So I wanted to talk today about a tip that I have been testing over the past couple weeks, and it's related to the way your cognition works, okay? So imagine that you're in a stressful situation. What do you tend to do in that situation? How do you feel? What do you think? If you're like me, you tend to go off into sort of a la-la land, specifically NP types, anyone who has extroverted intuition as one of their leading cognitive functions. If you're not familiar with the cognitive functions, I would highly recommend C.S. Joseph's channel and also Chad Crandall. And you'll see those when you search the various cognitive functions, which are extroverted intuition, extroverted sensing, and so on and so forth for thinking, feeling. People who are high on extroverted intuition tend to go off into their heads when they're stressed because they kind of lose their ability to tie down on the weaker parts of their personality, which in the case of strong NP types, you kind of lose your ability to do introverted sensing, which is that direct experience of the things that you're doing. Like, for example, even just as I'm talking to you, or better off, even better, imagine as you're listening now, are you sort of off in your head? Are you off in some sort of dreamland, like having a bunch of ideas pop up in your brain? You're like, ooh, this is related to that. Maybe even as I'm talking, I'm like, ooh, this reminds me of that. This reminds me of that. That would be extroverted intuition. So instead of doing that when you get stressed, you need to ground it somehow. And you probably heard this term grounding all over the place. Well, what that really is referring to for NP types, it's different for different people, but for NP types, it's referring to introverted sensing. And the simple quick trick that I found is all you have to do is, instead of letting your mind go all these places, instead what you should do is focus on what's happening right now. So, for example, I might focus on this picture, the bookshelf, not thinking about them. And this is different than meditation because there are different types of meditation. And what I'm talking about is a specific way of focusing on reality. So I could look at my hand and just observe the hand. Don't think about it. Don't be like, whoa, man. Don't get all tripped out by it. Just be like, this is a hand. And a good cue to know if you're doing it correctly is do it in such a way that you're going to remember it in the future. And the whole thing that kind of got me into this in the first place was driving, because I just noticed this recently, that when I drive, I tend to zone out and I don't remember anything. And I've noticed that I get anxious when I'm driving. So I tested this repeated times, like, if I'm anxious and I do this, does it work? So I'm driving and I'm like, well, let's try to remember sitting here. Let's try to remember that pole, because I drive on the same roads a lot. Let's try to remember that detail. And so over time, what it does is it literally grounds you and roots you in reality, because that's kind of how your brain works. It kind of pulls you into the moment. Not the extroverted sensing moment, I'm going to remember this moment. That's the distinction between introverted and extroverted sensing. Okay, so that's really it. And what are some scenarios this could be useful in? Job interview, driving, obviously, making a video, working on a project. Anytime you get anxious or have a panic attack, perhaps. Some of you may have those. I have had some before, to be honest, because I didn't know this trick. In the comments, I would appreciate any other ideas you have related to this topic. And of course, feel free to do what you want, say what you want. But I would prefer that you do that. All right, so that's about it. Peace.